Whenever people find out that I'm an FBI agent, the first thing they want to know is if I'm involved in any dangerous undercover operations. Nobody ever believes me when I tell them that most of what I do is boring paperwork. I guess we have the movies to thank for that, but that doesn't mean everything is always hunky-dory. Sometimes I'm involved in operations so dangerous that they leave me permanently scarred. Like that one incident last year. It started like any other case. I was investigating criminal activity on the dark web. It's common practice for the FBI to set honey traps on the dark web for people trying their hands at one of the illicit activities that the dark web is famous for. It's boring, painstaking work, but it has to be done. Peter Scully was caught because of work like this. The Silk Road went down because of work like this. That's why I didn't complain when they handed me the treasure hunt assignment. The first thing they had me do was commit a crime on a camera. I think it was their idea of ferreting out cops. Well, joke's on them because the brass would excuse a little shoplifting in the line of duty. So that's exactly what I did. A nice video of me pilfering a lunch bar from Walmart. With that, I was in. We met every Tuesday in a chat room on the dark web. The game master would give us a few clues and send us out to hunt for treasure. Teaming up was allowed if you were ready to trust the others with your identity. It was subtly encouraged to do anything you had to do to win the treasure, even breaking the law, but never explicitly stated it. Initially, I had wanted to drop the case because I thought it wasn't worth my time. Sure, the Game Master had some angle they were banking on, but I don't think it was anything major. But some instinct told me to stick with it, so I did. In the second month of me playing the game, I won the treasure. The clue had been cryptic. Venture into the City of Flame and find the mythical object of Jack's elevation. Search amongst it that spoke to a murderer, a savior turned. I had cracked my head for a week before I figured it out. The City of Flame was obviously Chicago. That one was easy. The second part should have been obvious. But it took me a while to figure out which Jack was being referred to. Once I got it, I felt stupid. Of course, it was Jack of the Beanstalk. The Cloud Gate. The last part gave me a headache. I had to get help from another agent who was passing through Chicago. It's a bush. Like the burning bush that spoke to Moses. Jesus, Miller, weren't you raised Catholic? He remarked with raised eyebrows. Bottom line is, I won. Once I opened the green package that had been masterfully concealed amongst the brushes around the bean, I realized this was no ordinary treasure hunt. No one had $10,000 to just give to strangers on a weekly basis without expecting some kind of return. There was some angle here, and I had a feeling that it was something very bad. Another month went by. More clues. More people won. No one ever shared what they had actually won. But I got the impression that the treasure was increasing with each hunt. The clues were becoming harder to decipher. It felt like we were inching towards a climax. That's when they announced the big one, a large-scale night hunt at Palos Forest Reserve. For the first time, they announced the treasure beforehand. $1 million. No clues, no detective work, just a duffel bag with $1 million somewhere in the forest. We weren't allowed weapons, and everyone had to wear a body cam. Suddenly, I could see the angle. They wanted footage. Throwing a bunch of desperate people who had a taste of treasure into a dark forest at night, it would be a nightmare. A gold mine. I reported to the office. They gave me a debrief, but my boss wasn't sold. I don't see it, Miller. It's probably horse shit. There's probably nothing in the bag, he said. Great. I was on my own. My boss wouldn't throw his weight onto this, but he did give me a tracker to signal if I needed help. When I got to the forest, there was already a crowd there. Most were men, but I could see a few women sprinkled here and there. Everyone was wearing some kind of mask. Nobody wanted to risk their identity when it came to interacting with the dark web people. I had one too, a simple ski mask. There was a group standing to one side wearing red hooded robes and goat head masks. The Game Masters. They lined us all up, searched us for weapons, and fit the body cams onto our chests. We stood there waiting. You could almost touch the tension in the air. But far more potent was the scent of human determination and greed. "Let the hunt begin!" one of the Game Masters bellowed. People exploded into the forest. More than 40 flashlights pierced the eerie darkness of the forest, feet pounding onto the damp ground like an advancing army. I hung back. After all, I was on the job. But it was about 30 minutes in when I spotted it, a camera blinking red, strapped to a branch about 10 feet above me. My blood turned to ice. They wanted to catch the action from all angles. Even if they were expecting a Hunger Games-like bloodbath, this seemed like overkill. Unless they were expecting more. Unless they planned for more. Immediately, I started to sprint. On the way, I passed 2 masked people locked in a ferocious fight. Flashlights bobbing in the darkness, but I didn't stop. I needed to get to the front of the pack where most of the people were. I think I was getting close when I heard the howls behind me. The screams followed. This was it. The reason why they put the body cams on all of us. The reason for the overhead cameras. I kept running, and the screams of people in pain followed me, like someone had opened a portal into hell. "Run!" I screamed in the direction of a small group that seemed to be resting by a tree stump. They just stared at me. That's when the dogs caught up. Massive pit bulls that had rabid looks to them. A few of them even had bloody jaws. They fell onto people by the stump and started mauling them. The screams were deafening. 2 of the dogs made their way towards me. My blood sang with fear as they approached, their forms like twin demons under the illumination of the flashlight. They were about to leap at me when a loud whirling sound distracted them. A bright light shone from above, casting the forest around into a stark display of blood and gore. People lay onto the ground, crying weakly as the ferocious dogs tore into them. But most were now backing away from the light. The noise only got worse as the helicopter descended. I had signaled for backup the moment I had spotted the cameras. Several agents dropped from the chopper on ropes and had started shooting down all the dogs that hadn't been spooked by the lights and the sound. It took us several hours to account for everyone. Of the 44 people that had shown up for the hunt, 3 had been mauled to death by dogs, and 6 were in critical condition. Everyone else had scrapes and bites, but they'd live. Funny enough, the $1 million really was at the end of the forest, and it went a long way in catering for the funerals and medical bills of the victims. Of the Game Masters, there were no trace. They had gotten what they wanted. I was a good man. Even then, as I hid in the bushes watching the woman inside the house, I was a good man. The knife felt heavy in my coat pocket. Excitement coursed through me like lightning on a clear night sky. I shivered in anticipation. My reward was waiting for me in that house. My name is Shane Crawford. A few weeks ago, I discovered a life-changing service. It had arrived just in time, as the itching had just begun. I lived alone in a tiny studio apartment. No girlfriend, no kids, just me against the world. I didn't have a full-time job, but part-time gigs kept me afloat. Just enough to pay the bills. My room was always dirty now. Hygiene was the first thing to go once the itching started. Cockroaches crawled through the discarded pizza boxes on the floor. At night, rats nibbled on my leftovers. It was getting bad, but I couldn't act yet. I had to be smart. Things had changed so much. It wasn't like the old days. Instead of going out and feeding my hunger, I stayed home and surfed the internet. The regular web wouldn't suffice. I had heard of the dark web, the seedy underbelly of the internet where forbidden desires could be met. That's where I need to go. I hope to find a forum for people like me, maybe ask other practitioners how they fared in modern times. But finding what you're looking for on the dark web isn't easy. I kept stumbling upon illegal marketplaces, red room sites, and gore. The last didn't faze me. Images hold little power if you've seen the real thing. Killers with a Conscience was the name of the site. I stared at the screen in disbelief. If they offered such a service, all my struggles would be over. I did what I did because I had to. When the itching started, it wouldn't stop until I acted. I never enjoyed it, but it had to be done. This site would fix that. Their model was simple. They contacted people who wanted to die with those who, for one reason or another, wanted to kill. I had to reach out. "How does this work exactly?" I asked. "We provide a platform for moral killing. You can be rest assured that the people you are targeting want to die. This is sort of doing them a favor," a metallic voice answered. "How do you know they want to die? Do they come to you?" I pressed. "Of course not. We have hackers who infiltrate psychologists' institutions. They compile lists of patients who are genuinely suicidal. That's where we get our offerings." Listening to the metallic voice, I realized it was genius. And they were right. It was doing these people a favor. It would be foolish to pass it by. So I paid for the service, and they sent me a list of women to choose from. I wasn't one for strict patterns. I just needed to scratch the itch. Plus, patterns got you caught. I picked a woman at random, and they sent me her profile. She was a widow. Her children had moved away and hardly called. She was lonely and depressed. Releasing her would be the best for both of us. I started watching her. I knew where she worked, so I parked across from her building and observed. After work, she walked home since she lived nearby. I followed her for a week until her routine was ingrained in my mind like a permanent mark. I could already picture how I'd do it. The itching intensified. I was running out of time. For some strange reason, I felt apprehensive. Even though I was the hunter, I felt eyes on me. Every time I hid in the shadows, my instincts screamed at me. But I chalked it up to anxiety. Finally, the day came. I was ready. I knew how I'd do it. Everything was planned. So I stayed in the bushes while she cooked dinner, the knife caressing my coat pocket, my blood dancing to the rhythm of my pounding heart. Beads of sweat formed on my palms. Her lights went off. It was time. I rushed out of the bushes like a man possessed. The knife was already in my hand. It took me less than a minute to pick her lock. I had practiced a lot. I crept towards the stairs, careful not to make a sound. The parquet creaked slightly under my weight, and I prayed she wouldn't hear me. Her bedroom door was ajar, dimly illuminated by moonlight. The hunger surged in me like a storm. My fingers tightened around the knife, the hilt biting into my skin. There was a roar in my ears, demanding one thing. She wants this. I muttered to myself, steeling my resolve. I remembered the times I had done the same to other women. I always entered a trance, focusing solely on the task, shutting out everything else. I lifted the knife over my head and advanced towards the bed. Suddenly, the lights came on. "Freeze!" The command jarred me from my trance. I stared at the woman in confusion. She sat in the bed, eyes clear and focused, a gun pointed at me. "We caught him! Come on up!" She spoke into a radio. I heard movement downstairs, and within seconds, a dozen armed police officers burst into the room. I didn't resist when they handcuffed me. I couldn't understand what was happening. I was a good man. Why couldn't they see that? It was only at the trial that I realized I had been played from the start. The service was a honeypot. The FBI had set it up to catch people like me. There was no suicidal woman. She was an agent. I was angry that no one acknowledged that I was a good man. Sure, I made a few mistakes in the past, but I had been trying to kill with a conscience. A chill bites into me, and I pull my coat tighter around me. The alleyway I'm walking down is pretty dark, even with the moon out. Something rattles behind me, and I swivel my head to look. My heart is pounding like a bass drum. It's just a cat rummaging around in a trash can. I let out a nervous laugh and continue walking, but I don't relax anymore. I haven't been able to since I made that discovery. 2 months ago, everything in my life was going well. We had a nice middle-class home, both parents had very good jobs, and I was making my own money. My 2 elder sisters were in college, and I'd be joining them too in a few months' time. Life was good. You see, after I finished high school, I decided to try my hand at Forex trading. At first, my parents were skeptical, especially my dad. "This sounds more like gambling to me, son," he would say, but eventually, he came around when he realized how good I was at it. And I was really good. In my first 3 months of trading, I made enough money to buy myself a car. A yellow Camaro, like the one from Transformers. I was making so much money, I started questioning whether I even needed to go to college. The money opened up some new social circles for me. I hadn't been a loser at school, but I wasn't what you'd call popular either. The money changed all that. Suddenly, I had all these women blowing up my phone, begging me to go out with them. And the parties? I lost count of how many I attended. It was all just one hazy memory of unfettered hedonistic pleasure. It was at one of these parties where I first heard about the auction. The one place where you could get items and tools you couldn't find anywhere else in the world. What really got me interested were the rumors about a bot that didn't miss when it came to trades. I mean, I was good. Sure, I blew some trades here and there, but overall I did well. The bot was supposed to be 100% all of the time. Of course, I had to have it. So one Saturday evening, I got out my laptop and booted it up. A shady auction full of miscellaneous goods could only be found in one place, the dark web. I was no stranger to the dark web. I explored it a bit when I was younger, but it still made me nervous. I put in the link I had been given at the party and waited while it loaded. A video feed appeared on the screen. There was a man wearing a ski mask standing in front of a podium in what looked like a decrepit church. Next to the feed was a chat box where some messages were flying in. There were 200 people already watching the auction. "Bite Fever ransomware sold to Mr. Bucks Bank 99 for $1,000, the auctioneer rattled off rapidly. That's when I noticed another section on the screen. where you could type in a bid and press enter to lock it in. Bids would pop up on the screen as green rectangles, with the bid details in bold text. The auctioneer kept up his rapid-fire chants, and people continued bidding, buying the various items he listed. There was a lot of ransomware, blueprints for some banks, 200 pounds of cocaine, and a bunch of other stuff. By the time the auction ended, I was hooked. There was just something about faceless strangers meeting in the dark fathoms of the internet to buy and sell illegal chattel. It lit a fire inside me. There was no bot sold that night, but that didn't matter because I was definitely coming back. The next Saturday found me already eagerly awaiting the auction to start. There were a few other people connected too, conversing in the chat box. I hear the rat catcher is in the house tonight. Who's the rat catcher? I typed in. Someone with the username bunnyboobs/V responded, information broker. He sells data on hidden rats. I was confused. I didn't understand what he meant, but missed my chance to ask because the auction was starting. The auctioneer went through a bunch of items, but I wasn't paying attention. My mind was now on the rat catcher. Even the trading bot I joined for was momentarily forgotten. Finally, it was time. You could feel the excitement in the air. There was now more than 1,000 people tuned in to the auction. Messages were popping up in rapid succession in the chat box. We're screwed. The mob bosses always do a full sweep. Nah, f*** that. This time I'm not folding. One rat could set us up for life. I still didn't understand what the big deal was. Elijah Monroe, 32, Arlington, Virginia. Class 3, bidding starts at $2,000. Immediately, the bids started flying in. Started from $8,000. Class 3 rat sold to Gangbanger 99. The next item sent to a chill through my bones. Sam Wilson, Blackwell, 52, Wisconsin. Rat Pack Class 5. Bidding starts at $10,000. I stared at the screen in shock. Samson Blackwell. That was my father's name. He was 57 years old, and we stayed in Wisconsin. Part of me thought it was a coincidence, but another more primal part moved my hands, and I found myself locking in a bid. I had to buy this information, even if it meant losing all my savings. 15,000? 15,500. 16,000? 17,500. The bidding was tense. A lot of people wanted the same thing as me. Maybe it was because it was a Class 5. A bead of sweat slid down my brow, and my mouth went dry. My eyes were narrowed onto the screen, my fingers typing rapidly in the keyboard. The loud voice of the auctioneer jarred me out of my trance. Going once, going twice. Sold to 4X Daddy 15 for 30,000. That was my username. I had won. I don't really remember the rest of the auction. I was in a daze. At the end, the auctioneer asked the winners to share email addresses so arrangements could have been made for the delivery of their purchases. He also shared an account where we could pay for our items. I got my package on Sunday. A zipped folder titled Blackwell sent to the throwaway mail I had given to them. There were a number of files there, PDFs, news reports, police reports, and photographs. Of me, of my father, of my mother, of my 2 sisters. My eyes were bulged and my body went weak. I read one of these files. 13 years earlier, my father had witnessed someone being murdered in a back alley on his way back to work. Like a responsible citizen, he had reported the matter, and the culprit had been arrested. That had been a mistake because the culprit was affiliated with one of the biggest gangs in Chicago. The gang wanted retaliation. They wanted my father dead, with a ferocity that bordered on insanity. So the FBI had stepped in and put our family in federal witness protection. The realization struck me like a ton of bricks. That's why we had to suddenly move. That's why we had to change our names. At the time, My father had said it would make it easier for us to fit in. I had been too young to question it. Naturally, I would give all this information to my father, and he confirmed it was all true before rushing to make phone calls. Within hours, men in suits were swarming our house, and in 24 hours we were gone. I have a new name now, a new home far, far away from Wisconsin. The FBI says we are safe now, but we were supposed to have been safe the first time. Sometimes I still feel eyes on me when I'm walking alone, and I often wonder what would have happened if someone else had bought the Blackwell Rat Pack package at the auction.